What's up guys, the TMax here. I vlog about language, culture, and travel, and I recently just finished 6 weeks traveling in Colombia. So this video is to break down about how I spent my money in Colombia. And if you want me to do any other videos about traveling Europe or Asia, since I've been tracking my expenses for so long, leave me a comment below, let me know that you want to see me do those videos, and maybe I'll do one. So let me first say that I am not a budget traveler. I have my areas where I will spend on the finer things and not compromise.
I sprinkle diamonds on everything I eat.
But there's also some areas where I will penny pinch like my life depended on it.
What's a Knickers?
It's the same as a Snicker bar, but it's a lot cheaper.
So let's take a look at how I spent my money for 6 weeks traveling around Colombia. The total amount of money that I spent in Colombia was $2,945.36. 13,767,728 pesos and 77 cents. So let's look at the breakdown of how I spent my money. Here's a handy dandy little graphic that I created. This is just how I was tracking my expenses. Don't worry, I'm gonna make it easier to read as we go through each of the places that I was in. In the 6 weeks that I was in Colombia, I visited 9 locations, and I did a breakdown based on the flight or bus to the place, lodging at the place, transportation in and around the place, food and drinks, and miscellaneous things like going on tours, buying souvenirs, or any fees that I may have encountered when using my credit card, for example. So let's start with Medellin. So the flight to Medellin is from the US, so that's why it's a little bit more expensive than all the other flights. And in the transportation category, that's gonna be a little bit higher too, because I took an Uber to the airport in the US, and the prices in the US are significantly higher than they are in Colombia. And you also notice that Medellin is the city that I spent the most amount of money in almost every category, because it was my first city. It was my first introduction to Colombia. I was going out every night and I was eating out every day, trying the local food, but like going to good restaurants and then going out with friends that I had just met. I was still on that high of, oh, I'm in a new country and I'm so excited. And so I did spend significantly more money. So of the 7 days that I was there, I spent $117.33 per day. Okay, so moving on to Cartagena, I took a flight from Medellin to Cartagena, and I spent about 6 days in Cartagena. I didn't travel too much around the city. I did mostly walking tours, or I would just walk to locations. Again, I met a fun group of people and we went out together, but we ended up doing a lot more free things. In the time we were there, it was right before Christmas, so there was still a lot of events and spectacles that were happening in the street for free. And also I was eating at the hostel mostly because the chef there was really good and the food was quite cheap. So I was just buying my food there. So in the 6 days that I was in Cartagena, I spent $51.89 per day. My next stop was Bogotá, Colombia. And there I actually stayed with a friend that I knew from back in the US. So lodging was free. Really all the money that I spent there was either trying to pay back the family for buying me food, or trying to pay for gas money when they would do something, or trying to treat them to the movies. So I really didn't spend much money except for the flight getting there and then the Uber to and from the airport. So of the 6 days that I was in Bogotá, I spent $20.63 per day. My next stop was Cali, and I flew here from Bogotá, and I landed about 2 days before the end of La Feria, which is a giant salsa festival in the city. And so there's actually quite a few free events to do, so I didn't have to spend too much money. But even though you do all the free events during the day, you still end up going to clubs at night. So everything in the miscellaneous category here was us going to a club and dancing salsa after dancing salsa all day in the streets. My lodging was also the most expensive here because I got a private room in my first hostel, and then in the second hostel I just got a dorm. And I also stayed in Cali the longest of any other city, and so my expenses reflect that. The 9 days that I was in Cali, I spent $59.49 per day. From Cali, I flew up to Santa Marta, and I ended up spending a little bit more on the flight just because of an error that I made. So that actually was the majority of the money that I spent in Santa Marta, because the hostel was really cheap, the food was pretty cheap, and I was only there 2 nights. And if you watched any of my YouTube shorts, you'll have known that Santa Marta is also the location that I got robbed. So maybe I should put like another expense in there, financial and emotional. So for the 2 days that I was in Santa Marta, I spent $93.42 per day. From Santa Marta, I took a bus to Tayrona. It was about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and was the cheapest transportation I have on this entire list. Had $1.88, which is phenomenal if I could have done that for all of them. But again, like I mentioned before, some areas that I don't want to compromise on, and I didn't want to sit on a bus for 37 hours just to save, $100. So I forked out the money to buy flights, but there's no airport in Tayrona because it's very close to Santa Marta. So I just took a bus there. And the lodging in Tayrona was actually quite a bit more expensive, even though I was in the dorms in a hostel, because the Viajero Tayrona is actually kind of like a resort. And I was there during peak time. So the dorms actually cost a little bit more than some of the other places I've stayed, but still were relatively cheap. And because of the location of this hostel, there wasn't really anywhere to go, so I didn't spend any money on transportation. And all the food was served at the hostel, and the prices were fairly reasonable, and the food was pretty good. So I didn't end up spending too much money on food or drinks because I just had all that at the hostel. For 3 days in Tayrona, I spent $61.90 per day. From Tayrona, I took another bus and a motorcycle to Minca, and I actually stayed in Bonda, but Minca is kind of the name of the area and the name of the little city. But Bonda is another city nearby, so the bus ride didn't actually take me into Bonda. I had to catch a motorcycle from there to the final place, and the motorcycle was like 75% of the transportation costs and 75% of the fear and peril that I would experience while getting there, because you're going up a dirt road on a motorcycle. I had to get off a few times just so the bike could get up the hill. So at this hostel, I ended up getting a private room because it was the only thing available. But after the experience that I had, it was totally worth it. So, And the transportation on this one was also quite expensive because I caught an airport shuttle by myself. There was nobody else leaving at the time that I was going, and I didn't want to ride a motorcycle to the airport. So I got the airport shuttle, which was like $38 of this total 40. So, and just like some of the other hostels, the food here was served at the hostel. There wasn't like any other restaurants to go to, and it was pretty reasonably priced, and the food was pretty good. So it made it worth it just eating at the hostel. And one good thing about this place is the drinks that they made were not that good. So I didn't end up drinking much alcohol there. For the 3 days I spent in Minca, I spent $86.12 per day. From Minca, I took that expensive airport transport to Santa Marta, and from Santa Marta, I caught a flight to Bogotá, and then from Bogotá to Bucaramanga. But because I had a flight delay in Santa Marta, I ended up staying the night in Bogotá in a hotel, and then went in the morning to Bucaramanga. So I missed that first night in Bucaramanga. But all my food and transportation and hotel was paid for the night, and the hostel in Bucaramanga did give me a refund for that first night. And since I was only there 2 nights, I did have a private room, but it ended up not being too expensive because I only paid for 2 nights instead of 3. Bucaramanga also, in my opinion, is the most underrated place in Colombia. Not many people are going. A lot of people never even heard of it. It's very near San Gil, which is like adventure sports area, so whitewater rafting, bungee jumping, that kind of stuff. But also the second largest canyon in the world, Chicamocha, is near Bucaramanga. So if you get a chance to go to Bucaramanga, I definitely recommend it. So for the 3 days that I planned to spend in Bucaramanga, which include the 1 night in Bogotá, I spent $73.52 per day. From Bucaramanga, I took a flight to Salento. I had to stop in Bogotá again and then caught the flight to Pereira. And then from Pereira, I caught a taxi to Salento. And just like with Minca, all of my transportation fees were actually just to and from the airport. And they were quite expensive because, again, I got a private shuttle. There was actually a couple that I was going to share with, but they got to the airport later than I did, and I needed to be there early for my international flight. So I ended up paying for a whole shuttle by myself. And then coming with the taxi, I had to pay for that by myself too. So that's why my transportation costs were higher. And here I spent a little bit more on food too, as the breakfast in the hostel was a little bit more expensive, though it was pretty good. And then going out in the town, I ended up spending more money on food, and we actually went to some bars, and we played Tejo, and so, they don't even charge you for the game, they just charge you for drinks. So just spending the night out in the town, you end up spending a little bit more money on food and drinks. For the 4 days that I spent in Salento, I spent $75.50 per day. So if we break down each of these categories, my flight/bus, and this is just transportation in between and to and from cities, that was about 27% of my total costs. And you can see the breakdown here of the per day, per week, and per month. for each of these categories. Lodging was the second most expensive expense that I had at 26.85%, and that actually would have been more if I hadn't had free lodging in Bogota. Transportation, this includes going to and from the airports and then also in and around the town, and this was only 11% of my expenses. Food and drink, this was 25.39% of my total expenses, which actually is pretty good. I thought I was going to spend a lot more on food and drink, but Colombia, the food is actually quite affordable. Alcohol is a little bit expensive in relation to the total prices of everything else, but it's still much cheaper than the US or Europe. And my lowest expense at 9.48 was miscellaneous. So this is the tours. I don't really buy souvenirs, so that wasn't a thing. I didn't have too many fees that I encountered, but the 9.48% went toward mostly tours. So if you look at my three biggest expenses, almost 80% of my total expenses came from flight, lodging, and food. And these are three areas that are very easy to either spend more or spend less. I didn't take any buses except for when I had to, because that was just something I decided I didn't want to do. But I could have saved probably 70 or 80% of my total expenses had I just taken a bus everywhere. And for lodging, I could have stayed in a bigger dorm or at cheaper hostels, but I didn't want to. I wanted to stay where I wanted to stay, so I picked the places that I did. And actually, had I went Airbnb, I probably would have spent about 2 times as much as I spent. The Airbnbs were generally about twice the price of private rooms and hostels. So if you're a couple, Airbnb would probably make sense. But for a solo traveler, I wasn't in any of these places long enough, and I really wanted the social interaction, so a hostel made more sense than Airbnb. And then, of course, food. I made it a point to try all the local dishes. And sometimes, the higher end restaurants were the ones that were recommended. And it was like, I want to try this food, so I don't care how much it costs. And I went and paid for it. And especially in Medellin, when we went out, you buy drinks and you buy 3 or 4 and you don't even think about how much it costs because you're paying in a foreign currency. And then you get that bill later and you're like, oh man, I spent $30 on drinks, which again, if you compare it to the US or Europe, would be cheap. But in the total scheme of things in Colombia, that was quite a big expense. So had I restricted the amount that I drank, I probably would have saved a lot of money. I have a credit card that offers me 1% cash back on all purchases. So whenever I could, I used this credit card. So of the $2,945 that I spent, I ended up getting about $150 cash back on my credit card. So in theory, I actually spent less money. I think there were only 2 locations where I was charged a fee to use my credit card: Salento and Minca, and it was about 3 or 4%. So obviously that negates that 1%. But in all the other places, I used that 1% and I got all that cash back, which was good. And with my debit card, I get reimbursed for ATM fees. So I didn't have to worry about, trying to take out as much money as I could at one time. I could take it out whenever I needed it. But if you don't have this kind of debit card, take out as much money as you can at one time, because the fees are astronomical sometimes. Like one place was like $5, like 75,000 pesos. And I was like, what? That's insane. So you gotta keep that in mind. And one thing I wanted to share, I stayed at all hostels except for one night, stayed in a hotel because of the airplane issue. And it was a Habitel, which is near the airport. And the check-in there was 1,000 times slower than any of the busiest hostels I've been to. I mean, there was like 8 of us checking in that were on this flight, and it took them like an hour to check us in. So I don't know if this was incompetence or the system was slow or they just didn't care. But yeah, so I didn't stay at any hotels on this trip other than that, and I'm glad, because if they would have been that slow, I would have been like, hurry up. And one other big important thing to note is that I'm a digital nomad. So I have a full-time job that I do remotely. As long as I have Wi-Fi, I can do my work. And generally, I would just do my work in the mornings as much as I could, go out and enjoy the day. And then at night, just try to finish up any last minute things. So I have an income while I travel. And this is also part of what influences my spending habits. I don't mind flying and I don't mind doing certain things because I am making money as I live here, as I'm traveling. So keep that in mind when you're making your budget when you come to visit Colombia. So for this entire trip, I spent about $70.13 per day. If you took that to the week, it would be $490.89. And if you made that monthly, it would be $1,963.57. So I guess the question you have to ask yourself is, if you want to travel the way I did, can you afford $1,963 per month? If you can, then you can probably travel the way I did. And if you can't, there's lots of ways that you can make this trip much cheaper. And if you have more money than that, there's lots of things you can do to make that price a lot higher and more expensive. Whatever you need to do to make your travel suit you and so that you have the best time possible, do it. So if you like this video, please give it a like and comment and share and subscribe to the channel. And again, if you want to know more about my spending habits, especially from back when I was living in Europe or back when I lived in China, let me know. I've kept track of all of it. I was planning to do something with it one day and I didn't, but here I am now doing something. And if you want to see more, let me know. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you in the next video.